Back, Houston's photographers. Photographs came to be in the 1830s, a gift from the French. Not surprisingly, the first use of photography was simply people getting their pictures taken.
People have been making pictures of other people for as soon as they figured out they could. They painted them, the masters painted them, then the photographers figured out a way to recreate the light that the masters used to paint portraits. And as soon as the film and everything got good enough, they were doing people pictures.
They had studios, and what they had was skylights with a way to open and close them, and that was how they did their lighting.
Well, in the beginning it was expensive, but the price came down. It was just like everything else. The technology evolves to the point to where you can give the public really what they demand at a good price. The tintypes were very inexpensive, but then they came out with what they would call a penny tintype, which was a very small one that they would sell.
So why did our ancestors look so stiff in those old photos?
Well, the film speed was so slow. In the very beginning, a portrait, you might have to sit 15, 20 minutes. Now that evolved to the point where maybe it's now only a minute, 2 minutes to 3 minutes, but you try to have a baby sit still for that long, it's very, very difficult. In fact, it was so difficult that in a lot of portrait studios, they had braces that ran behind the neck and a little pad behind your skull that you could lean back and rest. But that's why you see everybody so stiff and frozen. That photographer sitting there behind that camera saying, stay still, don't move.
The business of early photographers expanded to commercial advertising.
And then photography came along, and we were able to photograph a person's product so that what you see is what you get, reasonably speaking. And so it started taking over the art of advertising.
Houston had a Ford motor assembly plant here in Harrisburg, so they wanted to sell Fords. So what they were going to do is get a photographer and get a brand new Ford, and they're going to get a pretty girl and put it in that Ford, very much like they do today. Electricity was coming into to high fashion, so they wanted to sell every appliance that used electricity. So Houston Lighting and Power would have the photographer go out and shoot very nice window displays. They would go and shoot displays inside of homes, illustrating this is all the utensils that now use electricity. You don't have to lug a chunk of ice in your icebox anymore with a drain pan.
Having 2 or 3 great clients who had a lot of new products coming online, as the oil industry did in the 40s, was tremendously important.
I think pretty much the same reasons that we do photography today commercially is what they were pioneering. They were making innovations into doing what we could do today with a click of a mouse and digital computer.
Houston was blessed with many talented photographers.
We've got a large collection from Frank Schluter, who started right before the turn of the century and actually stayed in business through the 30s and 40s. He, things that he did that I think are our particular interest are oil and agriculture, which most people don't think of Houston and agriculture, but we grew a lot of figs and oranges. There were a lot of groves around Houston.
Bob Bailey was one of those photographers who started out as an apprentice and then started doing his own work. And I have to feel that these photographers had pretty good personalities, because you had to have that type of personality to engage the companies to get the work. So Bob did a very, very good job, and his collection now sits at the University of Texas, which is over 500,000 images.
Another was Calvin Wheat, whose images make up much of Story Sloan's gallery.
As a matter of fact, Calvin Wheat was the official photographer of the Democratic Convention in 1928, which was an excellent feather in his cap. Calvin Wheat had every major Ford dealer account. He had Humble Oil, he had Gulf Oil. Well, Calvin had probably 7 or 8 different photographers working for him. Girls answering the telephones. He had quite a large staff. And from the photography that I've seen of the group events of the staff getting together, they all had a pretty good time. Thompson, Schluter, Calvin Wheat, Bob Bailey, those guys, the collections or images from their collections survived because they were very busy. So if we don't actually have a negative of it or a photograph of it, we can probably pull up an ad where the photograph was actually made or the client who actually paid them to create that image.
Photographers like Wheat predated Photoshop.
If Calvin Wheat had to shoot an assignment of an airplane flying over the city of Houston, but he wanted to freeze that airplane over the city, well, the technology wasn't there for the film speed to freeze that plane. Calvin would photograph the plane on the runway, then he would mask out all of the detail around the plane. So the only thing on the negative that showed up was the airplane. Then Calvin would shoot a skyline shot, a highlight skyline shot, and mask out the sky. And then he would drop the photograph of that plane in the sky, sandwich it, make a third negative from two negatives, and all of a sudden here's a Miss Maxwell House plane flying over the city of Houston, frozen. Now you can see the prop is frozen in the plane, so you know there's something going on. But back in 1928, they wouldn't know what's going on.
Even the best guys had to earn a living.
But Schluter didn't just take panoramics and big businesses, he took high school photographs as well. So, or children, portraits of children.
When I was a kid, people came around with a camera and a pony, and they would stop at every house and get the kids on the pony and get the house in the background and make your picture.
Most dangerous in those early days was aerial photography.
Some photographers even climbed out on the wing of a plane, and I can imagine inserting a film pack that had an 8x10 sheet of film in it. How many of those film packs ended up floating to the ground or hitting somebody in the head?
So they were taking these big cameras, these 4x5 and 5x7 inch, in some cases glass plate negative cameras, and going up there and basically sticking the camera out into the slipstream and taking a picture. So I'm guessing those guys were pretty rugged.
Coming up, preserving this photographic legacy.